Have you ever stopped to wonder why presentations are so bad everywhere, all at once, all the time? Well, I'm going to answer that question for you in this video. Like, actually answer it for you. This isn't a trick video. I am going to tell you the primary reason presentations everywhere in every industry are so terrible. So we're going to talk about the one thing that everyone is doing that they should not be doing. This alone will make your presentations better, like no more embarrassment, shame, or worried that you look bad. Plus, as a bonus, I will introduce you to what will make presentations amazing, impressive, something that inspires people and changes their mind. If that sounds good, let's get started. So welcome. Hello, I'm Dr. Echo Rivera. My 30-second bio is I have a PhD in psychology, in community psychology. So it's like a specialization in community-based participatory research. So that means I focused more on research and not clinical work. So there was a lot of data analysis and reporting and sharing data. It also means I was out in the community and I didn't just talk to academics. I had to communicate complicated, dry material to a lot of different stakeholders like service providers, people in the legal system, state and federal staff, etc. And back then, my research focus was on the services impact and legal system response to gender-based violence. So that means I had to learn how to communicate effectively when talking about a massively challenging topic, a topic people don't want to hear about, a topic that has a lot of strong, persistent myths, and a topic that, quite frankly, can be really depressing. But I was able to do that really well to the point where I had not just academics, but also like non-academics, like policymakers, state staff, service providers, tell me things like, wow, you're the only academic I've ever understood or enjoyed listening to. And that is because graphic design, web design, data visualization, storytelling, illustration were also things I was extremely interested in. I actually had a hard time choosing psychology as my major over design. But yeah, eventually I quit my research job and started this company where I mostly do professional development. I bundled all of that up to create professional development courses and private training, or in some cases I will even do design work for clients. But really, I love helping other people create better presentations so they can hear things like, that was the best presentation I've ever seen. And if there's one thing I learned through all of this training and experience is that people like us humans can pretty easily identify there is a problem. We are good at finding problems, but we're not as good at looking deep and finding the root cause of that problem on our own. Which means when left to our own devices, we usually blame the wrong thing for the problem. And therefore, as a direct result of this challenge that we have, we're pretty bad at choosing the right solution. We very often do things that don't solve the problem or make the problem worse. I'm not attacking anybody or calling anybody dumb or anything like that. This is just like a known thing in psychology. And that's the reason I'm making this video, because you already know there's a problem with the way we are presenting. So my hope is that I can help you see what the root cause actually is, and therefore the right solutions. So real quick, let's just make sure we're on the same page about the problem. We're going to define that super fast. The problem is that most people only know how to, or choose to, create presentations that are boring, confusing, overwhelming, or underwhelming, aka inaccessible, unprofessional, ineffective presentations, aka death by PowerPoint. The reason that's a problem is because what we would like instead, or like the future that we want, is for people to be able to, or to choose to create presentations that are captivating and engaging and insightful and interesting, clear, easy to understand, like totally make sense, concise, to the point, only what's needed and no excess, and convincing, memorable, changes the way people think about the world or themselves or an issue, changes the way people behave and act, aka accessible, professional, effective presentations, aka inspired by PowerPoint. I wanted to define the problem and point this out because if you were hoping for a video that was just going to trash on audiences and say that they are the problem, laptops are the problem, and it's not the speaker's fault at all, speakers are perfect, there's nothing to change here, you're not going to find that in this video. The point of this video is to help you move from here to there. And the first thing we need to do is clear your mind of blaming all the wrong things for death by PowerPoint. People love to blame software for this problem. Death by PowerPoint, right? People love to blame PowerPoint in particular. But that makes no sense. Like, you're watching a PowerPoint presentation today, and all of these slides were made in PowerPoint. And I encourage you to go spend some time with my other videos, especially some of my newer ones, and you'll see even more examples of PowerPoint presentations, none of which, I hope, are death by PowerPoint. It's not PowerPoint's fault. It's how people are using it. People will blame the material they're sharing. They'll say, oh, the material I share is too dry. It's not possible to make it interesting. I can't use visuals or stock photos with it, etc., etc. And I always find this a little confusing because I'm like, well, at some point you found it interesting, right? Like, that means there's something interesting there. And you just have to find a way to shine some light on that. And I promise it's really not that hard. Because I have a PhD, I've been able to work with others with advanced degrees, even when it's outside my specific field of psychology. And clients usually find that really helpful because I can help them find spots where they aren't explaining things clearly to people just a little outside their tiny professional circle. So I have either worked directly with through one-on-one calls, or people have taken my course from all types of fields and disciplines. So psychology, philosophy, sociology, linguistics, history, social work, political science, public health, computer science, biology. I can't keep up with my own list. Environmental science, the legal sector, the health sector, business sector. Like, I have worked with people from all of these fields. I have such a fun job. I get to learn so many cool things. But more importantly, what I want to say is, like, I have not worked with a single client where I was totally stumped and there were no ideas. There is always a way to make anything engaging. Even if you have to talk about language and words, even if you have to talk about legal precedents or policies, even if you can't use stock photos, that's not the only option you have. There is always a way. People also love to blame the audience for this. I've seen people actually try to say that the audience wants to see a standard text-heavy presentation because they're like professional or something, which is a total joke. I've never met a single person in my life who wants to be bored, confused, overwhelmed, or underwhelmed. I just wish people did some perspective taking and actually imagined someone thinking this, like someone literally sitting there in your presentation, and how realistic is it that they'd be like, oh, I am so glad I'm bored to death. I was like super worried earlier that I'd find this presentation interesting, right? Like, that's not a thing. When people say this kind of stuff, like, oh, well, yeah, sure, it's a massive data dump and the slides have no visuals and are just text, but that's like accessible and professional. Like, what? Like, it's so obviously not accessible, and it's so obviously not something anybody would ever want. It's clearly just a way to do nothing and to feel good about it. It's just an excuse to never improve and to grant permission for giving a death by PowerPoint. Now, the fact that you are watching this video tells me that this doesn't feel like an option for you right now, and that makes me so happy. So I doubt I'm talking about you, but you still might actually have other people try to convince you of this, and so I just want to help you resist that. And I do have like a whole mega essay on my website about this issue. I'm trying to turn it into a video. I really hope to do that one day. So maybe by the time you're watching this, it is. So take a look for that. But if not, like, I do thoroughly destroy this claim elsewhere in that essay. And the TLDR, the too long didn't read of that, is that basically people will say visually engaging presentations are unprofessional or inaccessible because they don't want to put in the effort to make professional or accessible presentations, and they can actually get away with that. But they're also not going to admit that that's what they're doing out loud, but they are going to try to convince other people of that so they can keep getting away with it. So take a look if you're kind of stuck here and you're really, 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 really worried about this professionalism issue. But let's kind of move on, because if they aren't blaming their audience, if they're not blaming the material or the software, well, what's left? Sometimes people will blame their circumstances, like time. I don't have enough time to make better presentations, people say. This one seems like it actually makes a lot of sense, right? Like, no, I feel like no one has time for anything, right? We're all overworked, we're tired, we don't have enough time in the day, and that is legit. So I'm not doubting the fact that you probably don't have a ton of time. However, and usually what I see from people who say this about presentations, who say, I cannot create better slides because I don't have the time or the energy, because sometimes people say time, but what they really mean is energy. But yeah, basically what I see is they're making slides like this. They're making standard death by PowerPoint, text heavy, full of templates, messy design, confusing design, etc. So if that's the situation we're talking about here, time is actually not the problem, not even close. These slides very often take a lot of time, and yet they look terrible. So lack of time may be a factor to consider, but it's definitely not the root cause of the problem. So I need you to know that it takes the same amount of time to make this death by PowerPoint slide and this slide. These take either the exact same amount of time, or honestly, the better slide could actually take less time. And that's because I often see people waste a depressing amount of time searching for clip art or trying to get ChatGPT to make the perfect image or searching for a design template, all that stuff. All of that is a waste of time, and it doesn't even lead to a minimally basic accessible slide. Whereas the slide on the right takes a few seconds. And I have videos showing this elsewhere on my YouTube channel, and check out my spring cleaning video in particular as one example. But yeah, in a lot of cases, especially if your slides are that kind of standard type of slide, more time isn't going to do a single thing to help. You'll just be spinning your wheels, making your death by PowerPoints more death by PowerPointy. All right. The other thing I hear is about ability, talent, or lack thereof. So have you ever thought things like, I'm just not creative enough for this. I'm not a visual thinker. I can't think about design. I can't do design. This is another one I hear a lot from people. And I'm just going to say, look, you do not need to have this manic pixie girl brain to design slides or whatever you're thinking. You do not need to be an artist to do this. There are some really basic, easy design formulas that anybody can do. They're easy to remember. They're easy to implement. And you've probably already had to be creative in your everyday work. If you ever come across a new problem and you need to solve it, usually you are using creative problem solving to do that. That's pretty much the type of creativity you need for a presentation. It's not always art or design creativity. It's trying to be able to solve a problem. It's just a communication problem. And in terms of being a visual thinker, I hear that a lot too. People will say, well, I'm just not a visual thinker. Well, yeah, neither am I. Literally, I have aphantasia. I do not see pictures or any type of visual in my mind. I don't think visually. I've never been able to do that. I literally cannot. This has had no impact whatsoever on my ability to create slides that use visuals. So the same can apply to you. And keep this in mind as you watch today's video and my other videos. They are all made by someone who cannot think visually, so don't worry about it. And then finally, the last one I wanted to talk about here is something that I think I would consider to be my number one pet peeve. Okay? It happens when someone watches a great presentation. Again, a presentation that's clear, captivating, concise, all that good stuff. They watch it and they're like, oh, wow, you're such a natural at public speaking. Wow. It's not the worst thing that can be said, but I really, really hate it. I know it's meant as a compliment, so it might sound weird to hear someone say they hate compliments. So maybe if we apply this so-called compliment to other settings, you might see what I'm getting at here. Let's say you're a surgeon and you just saved a patient's life. And they're like, oh, wow, thanks, doc. You're such a natural. Or you just finished a recital and played a challenging piece, and someone says, "Bravo, bravo, clap, clap, clap. You played that concerto so beautifully. You're such a natural. I'm super jealous." One more. Let's say you're a pilot and you land the plane, and maybe there was even a scary moment with some unexpected turbulence. And the passengers say, "Oh, yay, we're alive. You landed the plane and we made it. Good thing you're such a natural." Do you see what I'm getting at here? And why there is kind of a problem with this phrase in certain situations? Watching someone else complete a challenging task and then saying you're a natural to them can dismiss the intensely hard work that person put in to reach their current level of skill and expertise. I hope with at least one of those examples, you might have felt like, oh, yeah, okay, I see how "you're a natural" would not be the right phrase to say as a compliment in that situation. Because you know that someone can only become a surgeon, a musician, or a pilot, etc., after years and hundreds, if not tens of thousands of hours of training and practice and dedicated study, dedicated effort. And that if you were to tell someone like that in that situation, "Wow, you're such a natural," they'd have every right to respond with like, "How dare you?" Like, this took years of training. I went into debt for that training. I worked so hard to get here. This took tons of practice, sleepless nights, blood, sweat, and tears, and so on. And while yes, sometimes certain personalities or aptitudes can be a benefit to someone in a certain career or position, that's usually not how this phrase is used or what it means. So we know to not use this phrase in those types of situations. So why is it that in the public speaking world, we find it more acceptable to use this phrase when we see someone present in a way that is powerful and effective? Is it because we actually do think some people are born as natural speakers? Like from childhood, they were just like meant to be public speakers. And that this dichotomy of natural speaker versus everyone else is like a real thing that exists? Yes. That's exactly what I think is going on here. And I hate it so much because it gets in the way of people improving their presentation skills. On the one hand, some people will convince themselves that they are not a natural speaker and just like can never be good at this. Usually it's more introverted people, not always, but when they try to make presentations better and it doesn't quite seem to work, some people will think it's just further validation that, well, some people are naturals and some aren't, and I'm part of that group that isn't a natural. I can never be good at this. And putting together a presentation turns into self-doubt, lack of confidence, feelings of dread, and it becomes something that they try to avoid. And then on the flip side, some people think that they are the natural speakers. They're the lucky ones. Usually this is more extroverted people, but not always. Really, it's more just people who just don't seem to have trouble getting up in front of a crowd and talking and speaking. Or maybe they do actually just enjoy working on presentations. They do actually have fun. But what happens is that they start to equate just like being comfortable talking in front of an audience with being an effective communicator. But if you want to create an engaging presentation that impacts people, that achieves those goals we talked about in the beginning, you actually need a comprehensive set of interdisciplinary skills. Here's just an example of some skills that can help you put together a great presentation. Psychology in terms of how people think and learn, graphic design so the slides are engaging, not confusing, general public speaking skills, the ability to deliver the presentation itself, storytelling or narrative building, writing a script, the tech side of it all, information design, instructional design, and creative problem solving. I'm sorry, but in what world would someone just know how to do all of this naturally on their own? That's so unrealistic. So we need to completely disconnect these two things. Level of comfort speaking in front of people is not a bad thing to have, but in no way, shape, or form is it the same thing as being able to do all of these things, to create an engaging, effective, powerful presentation. And honestly, It's not even required to be able to do these things. It's not even necessarily what I mean by the public speaking part. You can be completely uncomfortable and still follow effective public speaking strategies. It's just that being comfortable in front of a crowd is a nice to have. And in terms of the whole introvert versus extrovert thing, each one has unique strengths and weaknesses. As just one example, introvert types, or even those who are anxious, might hate every step of the process and feel like crap during the whole time, but they may prep really well and storyboard like a pro, whereas extroverts might love it and enjoy it and can think on their feet, but they're much more likely to confuse their audience and are hard to follow because they don't always prep as much as they should. That's just one example. Really, my point is, yes, it might impact your presentation style, whether you're an introvert or extrovert, but neither one means you are doomed to fail or destined to succeed. And I really want all of my introverted friends or everybody with public speaking anxiety to hear me on this. Look, I am a level 10 introvert. To me, I would choose a book or a video game over socializing any day. I have very little need to leave my house. On top of that, I had an intense fear of public speaking when I was younger. I hated people looking at me. I threw up before presentations. I would shake the entire time. And yet, somehow, starting from the time I was in undergrad, I had people constantly tell me things yeah, that was the best presentation I've ever seen. You're such a natural. No, I just worked really hard to get here. And in fact, I had to overcome a lot of anxiety to get here. I had to overcome my inclination to just stay at home and not talk to anybody to do this. I am the opposite of a natural speaker. How dare you? So yeah, that's why this is my big pet peeve. It's a little personal. Now, this is when you might expect me to say, so if I can do it, you can do it too. You can overcome your anxieties. And while I do think that's true, I don't think I'm special. I just put the time and practice in. Really, my point is you can be anxious. You can hate everything about giving presentations and standing up in front of a crowd and still totally rock it and create presentations that people love and remember. So those are the 6 things that people will wrongly blame for the reason so many presentations are hard to watch. How many of them did you believe before today? And did I miss anything for you? I'm curious. Let me know other reasons that people come up with, yourself included, for why making better slides doesn't seem possible, or why people choose to not make them better. And again, the main reason we need to shine some light on all of this is because if we believe the wrong cause, then we are not going to figure out the right solution. And there are so many myths out there about how to create an engaging presentation as a result of this. Just as a very quick highlight reel, what tends to happen is the same bad advice just gets parroted. People just repeat the same things over and over. And when people don't have their own knowledge or skill set when it comes to something like this, what starts to happen is if they keep hearing the same thing multiple times from multiple sources, they start to think that's true. Because sometimes it is actually true in that case. So again, people aren't very good at knowing which repeated things are true or false unless they have their own professional development, their own training or experience in that topic. And here are 2 examples of this for presentation design. To this day, I still hear people parroting things like use as few slides as possible, 1 slide per minute. Oh my God. If there is one thing that causes death by PowerPoint, it's this. And people will still have the audacity to spew this advice with confidence. Ugh. And second, I still hear about the stupid 10-20-30 rule. Even Microsoft themselves in 2023 are out there copying and pasting crap from 1999 and acting like this is still good advice. acting like this was ever good advice. Or maybe they're using ChatGPT, which probably just spits this out because of all the blog posts out there with bad advice, and everybody's just like copying and pasting each other. They should be embarrassed and ashamed of themselves for this. This is such trash, garbage, terrible advice. Oh, and Canva is out there saying this too, like they're not any better. And now that bots have taken over Google and SEO, that's what gets spit out when you search for tips. And I think this wave of trying to use generative AI as a search engine and for other things is just going to make this even worse. Can't emphasize this enough. This is trash advice. So why is it so popular? Because of that parroting effect. It's why something like propaganda, for example, is so good at brainwashing people. It's saying the same thing over and over with confidence, like kind of just like taking over, and it's on repeat, and people just start believing it. The same thing happens with slide design. Now, the outcome, I'm not trying to like equate the two, right? Like the outcome isn't like that bad, but I'm just trying to explain why that's why, even though you hear this from a lot of people, it's bad advice and it's going to ruin your chances of creating an engaging presentation. The second issue I see is if you don't know the root cause, you're going to be more likely to choose to spend your time in the wrong ways or in the wrong places. So you'll spend your time learning a new app, or you'll spend your time trying to make generative AI do it for you, or just in general trying to find some way to automate the visual creation process, or you'll choose to just focus on like one skill at a time. For example, a lot of people will be like, I'll just focus on data visualization skills, and then that will fix the problem. Or on the other end, they're like, I'm just going to learn storytelling skills, and then that will fix my problem. But all of that is going to miss the mark because none of them still are addressing the root cause. And when the root cause isn't accurately named or identified, what happens is that people try to fix their presentations using a very scattered approach. What I see in the presentation skills world is that people are like, I want to do this like baby steps approach. I'm just going to learn some like cool tips and tricks and hacks here and there. Like, all right, cool. I got this like one tip about fonts from this person. And then, oh, here's like a nice hack about how to use PowerPoint for this other person. And then, oh, here's like a cool thread of like 5 ways to do some like storytelling. And then, oh, sweet. Here's like a roundup post of the top 10 places I can find images, or like, oh, here's like the one trick I need to like convince audiences to pay attention, right? And like just like ad nauseum. And a lot of people who want to make better presentations try this approach. And I see where you're coming from, and I do think there are areas where a strategy like this makes sense. But do you see the assumption that you are making with this approach? This approach can only work if the pieces eventually fit together to form a complete puzzle. But with presentation design, that's not going to happen. They don't fit together. It doesn't add up. And sometimes they're even going to be in conflict with one another. But that's of course what happens. Tips and tricks and hacks are inherently superficial. So they cannot address any type of deep-rooted cause for a problem. So hopefully you now see the flaws embedded within each of these claims, and that none of these are the actual reason presentations are so bad, which means they're not going to help you find the right solution. So how about we wipe that slate clean and start talking about the actual reason people make such boring, confusing, overwhelming, and underwhelming presentations, and then the corresponding solution for creating better presentations. Because we blamed the wrong things, and there are some other cultural factors like the whole stuff about like soft skills versus hard skills, which I talk about in a different video. But because of that, we don't receive training on the skills we need to create an engaging, accessible, professional presentation to any audience. So we are operating without an effective communication framework. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like that's the root cause of why so many presentations are bad everywhere. It's because we don't get taught how to do this. Like I almost feel like it's ridiculous to say that, but luckily my PhD in psychology comes in handy, and I am fully aware of how people will twist their thoughts into a pretzel to convince themselves that it's actually not this simple. And that's usually done because they need to resolve some like cognitive dissonance or just like max cope, as the kids say these days. Projection, cognitive biases, not wanting to do the work themselves, so they're invested in the status quo. There's all sorts of things going on here. And it's very easy for any and all of us to get stuck here for one reason or another. So I do see it as my responsibility to highlight that it's happening here, most likely. Because truly, the only reason presentations are so bad is because people are doing it out there without the right training and supports. It's really that simple. So I could technically end the video here because I have fulfilled my promise. If you're convinced and you're like ready to go now, then I do have training for you. You can check out the link in the description. Cool, sweet, like let's do this. But I do have more secrets to reveal to you. If you keep watching, I'll show you why. Why are all of these skills needed? And why is training on it needed? Also, you might be like, well, wait, what's an effective framework then? I'll tell you. So let's do it. Let's start talking about what the right solutions are. We're going to start by thinking about what we're trying to do, what needs to happen if we want to say, yes, I've communicated effectively, I've made an impact. First, we need our audience to pay attention to us, like literally just be there watching and absorbing the information we are sharing. Second, they need to comprehend what we are saying. They need to understand it. Third, they need to remember it and remember it correctly, not some like edited, incorrect version, but the actual way we presented it. Next, they need to believe and trust it so they can ultimately use it in some way to change their mind or their attitude about something or just absorb that knowledge. This shouldn't feel wild or radical or strange. Like, do you see how this makes sense as a process that people need to go through if we want them to take the idea we're sharing and use it in some way? Now, it makes sense to think of this as a linear process. If you aren't able to convince them of what you want to say and they don't believe you, they're not going to use it in the way that you want. If they don't even pay attention to what you're saying, then there's nothing to understand, remember, believe, or use. Like none of it will happen if they don't even pay attention. So each stage is important to move through. But I also want you to think about this as a system. I love talking about communication-related things as gears in a system because it helps you remember that every piece is important all the time. Here's what I mean. If you are doing things right, the whole process is going to go rather smoothly. It's going to work together as a system. But if you throw a wrench in just one spot of the process, the whole thing gets shut down. It's helpful to think about it as gears in a system because when we do that, we understand that breaking the process in just one part stops everything. So, for example, if you throw a wrench into the process that's needed to get people to move from the understanding stage to the remember stage, yes, it stops them from the rest of the process, like the believe and the use, but with gears in a system, we can see it actually goes backwards and stops people from paying attention as well. Yes, it stops them from the rest of the process, just as the linear model shows us. But with gears as a system, we can see it actually goes backwards and stops people from paying attention as well. It's not wrong to think in a linear way, and I have taught it that way in the past, and I continue to do so. It's like a very simplified way to think about this. But what I've recently realized is that people will think their audience will still pay attention even if they aren't understanding the material or if they aren't believing the material in real time. And that's not a good assumption to make. So it doesn't really matter which one you like more, the linear process or the gears. The important things are there are multiple stages or steps that we have to like move our audience through. And messing up one of them can actually mess up others, including the ones we thought we had already cleared. So we have to care about all of these steps all at once, all the time. Thinking about this process helps us get a lot more specific and actionable. Earlier, the terms I used about our goals were a little vague, right? Like make a captivating presentation. Well, like how do you take action on that? But now we're getting more specific by defining this a little more and saying, okay, so a problem presentation, a death by PowerPoint presentation, is one that specifically fails to get people through all of these stages. Or it's one that has a wrench somewhere in the presentation. Whereas in terms of what we want to do instead, a powerful presentation and engaging presentation is one that successfully moves the audience through these stages, through this system or process. It's the type of presentation that has something other than a wrench. Okay, so hopefully you see how this is turning into an actual framework that applies to literally any type of presentation given by anyone to any audience. And by showing you this, I've also introduced you to the number one root cause of bad presentations, the thing we need to prevent the most, aka the big baddie of presentations everywhere, is the wrench. The wrench shuts everything down. So we need to define it in practical terms. What is it? What's the wrench? Are you ready for the answer? The answer, the wrench, is cognitive overload. Cognitive overload is anything that causes your audience's brain to basically overheat because they are confused or overwhelmed. And in a way, this is also an answer to this core question of why are presentations so bad. The first answer explained more why people create bad presentations. It's just lack of training. It's just lack of training on how to create good ones. The other side of that coin, the flip side of that, is answering the question of why audiences end up hating so many presentations that they watch. The answer to that is because everyone out there is creating presentations that cause cognitive overload. So the audiences are experiencing cognitive overload, and that's what makes them hate presentations. So if you can prevent cognitive overload in your presentations, that is a gigantic, huge step forward towards making presentations that your audience at least won't hate. There are a lot of things that can cause cognitive overload in a presentation, but the primary way this evil demon wrench enacts their evil cognitive overload plan is through the trio of doom. Because like any final boss, they often hide behind other mini bosses that you have to battle first before you can even think about coming after the big baddie. In the presentation world, in the design for communication world, those mini bosses are clutter, chaos, and data dumps or information dumps. These are the mini bosses that you'll need to defeat along your journey to rid your presentations of the wrench of cognitive overload. So what are the weapons of choice for this trio? Well, clutter adds things to your presentation script or slide design that do not need to be there. It adds clutter to your presentation. As for chaos, well, it adds things to your presentation script or slide design that makes your audience confused or overwhelmed. It creates messy, chaotic, hard to follow presentations. And finally, with data dumps will fool you into thinking that the information deficit model of communication is helpful and effective. Now, I think most of these terms and what I'm saying are probably intuitive or you're familiar with them, but the one thing you might not be aware of is this information deficit model of communication. So what is that? Well, it's just the name for the type of presentations you are creating right now. Basically, everyone creates their presentations using this model without even knowing that this is the model that they're using. It's the model or assumption that says the reason people do or think X is because they don't know about Y. And when you start with this assumption or this model, then when it's time to put together your presentation, you're going to do it thinking, okay, well, if I just explain to them and share the data or share the information with them, I will fill in that knowledge gap that they have, and then they'll think or do Y. LMAO. Yeah, right. Maybe on some alien planet with some other species. But this is absolutely the formula to follow if you just want to fall flat with your audience. And you're putting yourself on this path when your first question that you consider when you're working on a presentation is, what do I want my audience to know? That's the question most people ask themselves. That's the advice most mentors or supervisors give, right? Like we've all heard, oh, well, just write an outline about the key things you want your audience to know. We do need to ask a modified version of that question at some point in the storyboarding or scripting process, but it should never be guiding our process. That is how you create a presentation that's just a data dump, aka an information deficit model of communication type of presentation, aka a presentation that's designed to just fill in a knowledge gap. Everyone does this. This is the default model that everyone uses because when you don't intentionally use an alternative framework, the information deficit model becomes the unintentional default. Another way to say this is if you aren't trained on another model, another framework, and you aren't intentionally using that model, this information deficit model, this knowledge gap filling model becomes the default whether you want it to or not. So just a little update to this new framework that we're developing here. We've refined it so it's clear that the big baddie is cognitive overload, and it uses the trio of doom to implement its evil plan to make people hate presentations. That's clutter, chaos, and data dumps. So let's start talking about this upper part here. What can we do instead? What is a different communication model? Because we need to replace the information deficit model with something. So how do we fight these baddies? How do we get rid of clutter, chaos, and data dumps and cognitive overload once and for all? How do we prevent our audience from getting bored or completely underwhelmed with our presentation? Well, we are going to use cupcakes. Specifically, the cupcake model of communication. This model reminds us that if we want to provide something our audiences enjoy, something that impacts them, we're going to need a tasty presentation. Our presentation is going to need 3 components to make a whole cupcake. We're going to need the core cake, we're going to need some frosting, and some type of sprinkles that can really help complete the package. Yes, of course, I believe in data. I have a PhD. I did research. So the cupcake model of communication will absolutely mean that you use data. It is, of course, an element, data, information, evidence to back up what you're saying. But that's not enough to prevent cognitive overload. If you only have data, that will just let cognitive overload take over. You have to include other elements. To prevent cognitive overload, you need to be able to make your point without data. You have to be able to use things like logic and plain language. There also needs to be some type of strong emotional connection and emotional impact with your audience. The biggest lie of academia, science, research, and any professional industry is that emotions are a bad thing, that emotions are a bad word. It's literally why you are currently failing to connect with your audience. We do not connect with each other. We do not connect with ideas over data. It does not happen. There needs to be some type of emotional pull for your audience to care enough about what you're saying, to pay attention to it, and to stay motivated and engaged with your entire presentation. Most presentations are completely missing the logic and or emotional aspect of this. Or even if they are included, people don't really know how this should all match up. Like, oh, is it that emotions are the sprinkles? Are those optional because not all cupcakes have sprinkles? Or is it that logic is the sprinkles? Or what? Like, how does this match up? And a related question is, can it change? Does it change depending on the audience or the topic or the length of the presentation or the format of the presentation? People don't really make good decisions when it comes to balancing this all out. So they end up having kind of like a weird tasting cupcake, something that's either maybe too dry or something that's just like too sweet because it's frosting only, that type of thing. But if you want to have an engaging presentation, this is what you really want to focus on, is balancing that out and choosing the right way to match all of that up with your audience and your topic and what you want to share. And with that, we have completed the introduction to my framework. The idea is that there are some things to prevent, to not do, and that's cause cognitive overload through clutter, chaos, and data dumps, while also working towards replacing that with something better, which is to create a tasty cupcake, a presentation that blends together data with logic and emotional impact. So I hope this video has helped shape the way you think about this problem, about why so many presentations really just are not good, why they fall flat, why the audience doesn't believe us, why they hate our presentations. It's because most of us unintentionally present in a way that causes cognitive overload, while also following along with the information deficit model of communication. An ineffective model because it's missing things like being able to use logic or plain language, and or because it actively avoids using strategies that enhance the emotional connection with the audience. Or even in situations where people are trying to use all of these things, they're not really balanced in a way that's going to be effective. So I really hope that today, after watching this video, you see why superficial things like changing to Canva won't help, why it's not about natural ability, and why ChatGPT or generative AI isn't going to help like we think it is. My hope is that you see it's a fundamental problem with the model of communication that people are using. And ultimately, this happens because there is a total failure in our culture to help people develop these communication skills. Whether it's because people dismiss it as a soft skill, which it so obviously is not, or because people are doing max cope and blaming other things, or they think it's because you have to be a natural, etc. The only reason people aren't presenting in more engaging ways is because the training and supports have not been there for people. The only reason people aren't presenting in more engaging ways is because the training supports have just not been there. If you're still watching, that tells me there is a chance you want to defeat the trio of doom and make presentation cupcakes. So, how do you do that? Look, if you're the DIY type, this is going to set you on the right path. Now you know to not waste time with the advice like the 10-20-30 formula rule. You know to start researching cognitive overload. Working memory is another angle to learn about that. You also know to boost your plain language and logic skills and to look for ways to emotionally connect with your audience. And at the very least, you have hopefully seen why you don't need to use something other than PowerPoint if that's what you're already using. This entire thing has been a PowerPoint presentation. And what you want to work on is having this interdisciplinary set of skills. Having a little bit of each of these is so helpful because that is how we prevent cognitive overload. This is what helps us with every aspect of that cupcake. So you want to combine all of these together. These are the skills for you to learn. But if that feels like overwhelming or stressful or like a total pain or impossible, I do have a presentation skills masterclass. It's basically like 4 workshops that you can complete at home at your own pace. It's a structured journey. I've mapped out the easiest order to learn how to do all of this. In each course, you learn different level appropriate cupcake strategies that's going to target one of the members of the Doom trio. In the first course, you're going to learn strategies within the cupcake components that you need just to defeat clutter. Clutter is the easiest mini boss. You're going to have no problem wiping this away with just a few new strategies. And in doing so, you'll have like leveled up on your skill tree, right? So you'll be ready to start learning the next group of skills, which again, it's like all organized, and that's going to help you tackle chaos. Now, chaos is a tough enemy. It's harder than clutter. So after course number 2, you're going to wound chaos. You're going to disable chaos for anything that is not data. Like for anything that isn't like graphs or like quantitative or qualitative data that you need to share. You're going to defeat chaos for everything else, but it's going to escape after the battle. But that's okay, because then you're going to build on the skills that you've already learned so far, new skills specifically related to data, so then you can finish chaos off once and for all, which then of course leaves you with data dumps, which is the hardest of the 3 to beat. You're going to need all of those previous skills and some new ones, some new ways of thinking, that new model of communication in order to defeat data dumps. And once the wrench loses its minions, once you're making those presentation cupcakes, the wrench has lost its power. It becomes so tiny that you don't even have to worry about it anymore. That's how I approached organizing this training program for you. This approach here, this masterclass I've created, is a fun and easy way to learn that set of skills I keep talking about. But only what you actually need in order to create engaging, effective presentations. My masterclass seamlessly integrates an interdisciplinary approach to presentation skills so you can create tasty cupcakes without having to spend a million hours sorting through all of those different fields to learn all of those different skills. I teach you just what you need to know for presentation design. No previous ability or aptitude for any of those is required. I give you the blueprint. That way, instead of learning a bunch of scattered puzzle pieces that never fit together, you get a framework. You get a system that will fit together in the end. So that's more of the outcomes of the course and what you'll be able to do when you finish and how you progress and develop those skills. In terms of the specific features of the masterclass, like I was saying, everything is broken up into 4 different courses or sections or modules. It takes only about 32 hours to complete this core program. So again, that's 4 full-day workshops. And what's really important here is that it's not just lecture. I'm not just trying to fill an information gap. You're not going to get a course based on the information deficit model of communication. I actually spent time working on my teaching skills to try to make this closer to active learning. It's a pre-recorded course, but still, I didn't want it to feel like it's just lecture. So I built in activities and interactions and practical activities and stuff like that. But if you don't like those, you can always skip those and it's fine too. Each course does offer a certificate of completion, and the course is software neutral. It doesn't matter if you're using Canva or PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever. It's just the course is the strategy behind presentation design. And a few things I want to highlight about the video part. The videos are short. This is a long video, but my online course videos are usually 5 to 20 minutes each because I made the course with busy people in mind, people who just want to watch one video here or there as they can. And I want to keep emphasizing this. The course goes in order for learning these skills so you don't have to worry about decision fatigue, about what to watch. You just log in and just watch the next video. You don't have to think about it. But it is also in the order of implementation. I strongly adhere to the idea of creating minimum viable products. We don't need to level 10 everything in our life, and that includes presentations. But even if we aren't going to level 10, we can still have a full, complete cupcake. Maybe it'll be more like box mix instead of something fully homemade or gourmet, but it will still be complete. So course number 1, for example, is a complete refresh, a complete level up to update your presentations. And it will be a good stopping point if you need it to be for a little while. So that's the learning material. You also get implementation resources because, again, I refuse to do the information deficit model. I know it's not just about knowledge gaps. So there are things like printable handouts and worksheets and cheat sheets, so you can reference those even after you're not in the course anymore. You get a visual database mini course and access to my personal online visual databases of free stock photos that I've personally picked out. There's over 1,000 photos in there, I think. I also spent a year of my life up-leveling my own PowerPoint technical skills to design a fully custom PowerPoint template for you to use. There are over 100 layouts, a bunch of cool assets in there, and training videos on how to use it. So if you do use PowerPoint, there is this additional resource. And we can chat. I run a few group calls each year. The frequency varies a little bit based on my availability. I do travel a lot, so it can change. But I'll do things like makeovers for course members. I answer questions just to help make sure you aren't stuck. So yeah, I really do work hard to make this a fun, engaging, active experience for you. I want this to be an adventure, not a grind. And not just in the learning part, but I really wanted you to have additional resources to implement what you've learned. I've been running professional development programs since about 2017, so you can of course check out reviews posted on the course website. And there are also case studies and before and afters that you can see. It's been an absolute joy seeing my course members improve their presentations, gain that confidence, and get those compliments. They sell their books, they sell their courses, and sometimes even get paid to speak. And so my guarantee to you is that if you follow these strategies, you are going to impress people. You will teach them in a way that deeply resonates with them and sticks with them for years and years. You'll never create cognitive overload again, and you're going to create engaging, professional, accessible presentations. You will hear, "That was the best presentation I've ever seen. You're such a natural." All right, you're amazing if you are still here. I would love for you to get started in the masterclass today. All the links you need are below. I really hope to see you in the masterclass program. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye now.